Hello and welcome to the Dr. Lake Show. This is Dr. Paola Lake. I'm really pleased to be here today and excited. I have a guest here that I had previously had the privilege of speaking with as I was doing community radio. His name is Ahmad Miles. He is a classically trained acupuncturist, now working in BC, Victoria, BC, British Columbia. He is also author of The Tao of Well-Being, and he's an award-winning poet, so he's definitely expanded into other areas. And I've always had an interest in the Eastern approach, and that for that reason, I think this is a wonderful topic to have. So great to have you here, Ahmad.
Thank you.
Yes, I know it was, I don't even know how many years ago it was that you and I met. Was that 5-6 years ago?
Quite a few years ago.
Quite a while.
Now.
My gosh, how time
Yeah.
flies. And I also have Dylan Soriano Powling here today. Some people have referred to you as my sidekick, but my sidekick, my co-producer here, always been very, very helpful as I've been setting everything up and the ongoing continuation of it. So, hi, Dylan. How you doing?
Hello, Paula. Great.
Yeah, wonderful.
Great to be here. Hi, Dylan. Hello, Ahmad. Welcome to the show. Thank you.
So, I think one of the things, Ahmad, you've been doing this work in acupuncture for quite a while. And what's interesting for me is that you actually trained in the UK and then you came here. I'm wondering if you could tell a little bit about your training and how it compares to some of the trainings that we might see here in the secular society, Western culture.
Yes, it was really different for various reasons. The classical work of acupuncture moved from the East, basically from Japan in between the two world wars, and kind of moved to Europe. And so the two countries that were predominantly holding the classical work in the second half of the 20th century were France and England, interestingly enough. Mm. And my teacher, Dr. Jack Worsley, was the person who was holding that work. And it was very different from the kind of acupuncture that was becoming dominant in the East and further dominated when the communists took control, which is much more materialist acupuncture. That is, it looked at symptoms and dealing with symptoms, basically. So a lot like Western medicine. And of course, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, it's all helpful. But where it missed out was in the kind of deeper sense of the human being. The symptoms are the surface, what is manifesting, but perhaps there are dynamics that are going on beneath the surface, unknown but observable, and to address those. And when I started studying back in 1983, my teacher, Dr. Worsley, said, when we started this college, which was a few years before then, 10, 15 years before then, he said, I would have said 50% of people were sick at the level of the spirit. Mm. He said, whereas now it is much more. This was in 1983.
Wow.
Just 20 years later, I think. He said it's about 85% now. So here we are in 2020. And so this issue of the spirit, what is the spirit, and why is it important to address that, is really at the core of the classical work. You don't really find it in the materialist acupuncture that predominates in North America.
Would you describe that as a mechanical approach here in North America? looking at physiology and,
Yes,
yeah.
yes, it's more, everything is derived from the body. And of course, all medicine is useful. It's not that it isn't.
Right.
It's just that it doesn't include, that part of it, and the classical work does, and in fact is the focus. And so the training, you were asking about the training as well. I mean, in my training, there were no books. There were books in Western medicine that we had to pass exams in, but everything was oral training, and diagnosis was through our senses. And what were we diagnosing? We were diagnosing the person. So we weren't diagnosing symptoms, we were diagnosing the person. So Dr. Worsley would say, Mother Nature is speaking through the person.
Right.
We have to understand what Mother Nature is asking us to do, and we do that. We are the servants of Mother Nature. So we would diagnose.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
I say we would diagnose through color that we saw emanating from around the face, particularly around the eyes, aroma that comes up from the body. It's not body odor, but there are different aromas, different qualities of voice, different certain feelings that are inappropriate but keep coming out from the patient. And this is a way that quite unconsciously the patient is sharing with you what Mother Nature is making the patient share with you. Impossible to hide. So it's not a psychological interpretation, but it's an energetic interpretation. And the ancient Chinese, they were very interested in how the universe worked. And so what they observed was that there were patterns, all kinds of patterns. And so they were interested in those patterns. And out of that came the awareness of the 5 elements, fire, earth, metal, water, and wood, as almost like the language of the cosmos, and that then manifests in human beings. And so when we're dealing with people, we're not just dealing with them, we're dealing with kind of cosmic reality or fundamental reality, something fundamental about being a human being in this world. And how are we being a human being? And the ancient Taoists, their interest was not what is happening to us, but how are we relating to what is happening to us. So everything was about relationship and the sense of an interdependent, organized, conscious in a way, reality going on, no matter what we might be thinking, So my job as an acupuncturist was to kind of delve into that with the patient and see what would come out. And then my treatments would be based on that. They wouldn't be based on treating the symptom. I could have 10 people with the same symptoms. No, it would be based on my diagnosis, the energetic diagnosis of this person, who this person is energetically. And looking through the lens of the 5 elements, fire, earth, metal, wood, water, and wood. So they had many correspondences, and one of the correspondences is the seasons.
Right.
So you have summer, late summer, what's called late summer, autumn, winter, spring. And you would be looking at what are the seasons, if you like, that really stand out in this person. Stand out in a way that there's an imbalance there. There's something that needs to be addressed.
Does the season actually literally refer to seasons? Or are they metaphorical seasons that we're going through internally?
Yeah, well, seasons are understood to be, there's the outside season itself, but there's the way that season works within us. And so we're now, I'm not sure if we're in the winter quite. Are we in the winter? Somewhere between autumn and winter. But at this time of year, everything is going inwards and downwards. So the sap is going inward and downward into the core, the root, to be protected, preserved there. And you get root growth and everything like that in the winter. And then you have the spring come when life can come out again. So going out would be called yang, going in would be called yin. So this is a yin time. And so when we have yin, we're in a sense our inside is more revealed or more exposed. We don't have the same outer skin. So we're likely to be more vulnerable, more sensitive, more feeling anything that's going on in our lives that doesn't work so well, whether it's physical health or relationships or work or whatever. We're going to feel it more at this time of year. And of course, things have been worsened this year because of COVID.
Right.
So where the spring and the summer should have been this expression of connection and connecting and enthusiasm and enjoyment and gathering and so on, we haven't been doing that. We've been doing an autumn-winter dynamic at that time. And now we're asked to do it again, as part of the COVID protocol. But also the season is asking us to do that as well. So it's very, very hard right now. It's very hard for people.
It's like
People
we
really
missed our
struggle.
summer. That might be the time for refueling and you said reconnecting, and we didn't have that, right? We didn't have that opportunity to, because it kind of does it. I think of even animals that go into hibernation, right? They collect everything they need and then they go to sleep with the resources that have been filled. Is it analogous to that in any way?
Well, yes, there is that. But the other thing I would say, which is very significant and can be a benefit to us, is that when we're not putting energy out all the time, which you could translate as warmth, not putting heat and warmth out all the time, which is basically the way the culture works. Our culture is based on doing. I do, therefore I am. Then we will tend to have the opportunity to keep that heat and warmth inside. And if we can, that nourishes the heart, strengthens the heart. But also it means that at this time of year, if we do or engage in more heartfelt activity, sharing of whatever kind we have with people, with ourselves, with our families, that's the way that we can create a better balance at this time of year. Is through the heart.
How do we?
So it's really important.
Yeah. I'm just curious, Ahmad, is for those that might experience some, of people that are diagnosed with seasonal affective disorder, or they're impacted by winter, and what that would mean, because in some cases, sometimes we retreat and can, fill ourselves, and other times in that retreat, it's a scary place for some people. Or perhaps an uncomfortable place, or isolating or lonely. And how does that get viewed with that Eastern perspective?
Well, again, just as I say, the point in that situation is to nourish the heart.
Okay.
So that means whatever you're going through, you share more. You're prepared to share more with people, And it doesn't have to be, oh, poor me. It's boy, this is really tough for me. This is what I'm going through. And, who you're ever talking to is going to say, yes, it's tough for me too. This is how it's tough. But if we can do things for one another, Bonnie Henry, our provincial health officer, said be kind,
Mm-hmm.
be kind.
Hmm.
And I think kindness is a key at this time of year. But not just kindness. We have the great fortune to have things like Zoom and so on.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, people will use them anyway just to try and maintain the old ways of doing things that they're used to. But I'm thinking more of where you could get together with friends, like Christmas is coming. Why can't we get together and sing songs, sing Christmas carols,
Mm-hmm.
tell jokes, do things that make us laugh, that warm us up, that connect us, just in very, very simple ways. So that's what the Chinese would say. They would say, nourish the heart, warm the heart. We have the opportunity to do it,
And
It's more difficult to do.
So it's through the connections that we build with people that we can share the heart. And so connection with others is an important piece, whether it's family or friends. How do you, one of the things that I did a recent show, I did a couple shows on loneliness, because right now I think the World Health Organization described it as a phenomenon of interest that is affecting people, that it's been rated as detrimental to your health. And I don't know if it's unique. North America is not classified up there on the happiness scale. We don't rank at the top. And I'm wondering what you see from your stance as some of the issues around this feeling of disconnect that people are having.
Yes, well, one of the things I'm aware of is that loneliness is really the absence of the sense of relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And the ancient Chinese, as I said, were very interested in not what is happening, but how am I relating to what is happening?
Yes.
And so to explore that side of things more, and to look at how I'm relating. How am I relating? So St. Francis of Assisi, for example, said, if you want to feel love, do love. Do more loving. Be more loving. And rather than thinking that we're getting deprived of something, think of it as an opportunity to give something. We're so caught up in a kind of consumer identity about getting. It's all about getting. Well, it's not all about getting. It's about giving and receiving.
Yeah. I fundamentally believe in that is the, to be that which you crave and yearn for, and be that to yourself as well. And so it's also how you're relating to your own feelings of loneliness that would also make a difference, is what you're saying. But to become,
yes, I mean it's complex, and I could go into it at great length, but I'm just wary of doing that on this show.
Yeah, might be another show.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, but it's I have patients who they're doing their best, and yet they'll have some kind of emotion that keeps coming through, and even things like extreme anger and fearful of releasing that anger, not wanting to harm anybody, not wanting to harm themselves, and feeling they have to control this abnormal thing. And I said to one person, well, the anger is you. The anger is you. And it's the you that you don't know. It's the true you. Because when we're growing up and so on, we get alienated from ourselves. We're obliged to in many ways, just through our family upbringings. The nature of the culture very often does not support who we are. Doesn't want us to become more of who we are.
And certainly
It's
not
all about control.
not our authentic self. There's
Exactly.
we kind of package ourselves up and present ourselves to the public. And
yeah. And it's all about control, and it's all about surviving. And it's all about what do I need to do to be liked, to be included, to be part of, And so this false identity builds up. But underneath there could be this seething anger that I'm just describing. And I come across this with patients. And I say, well, the anger is actually you. It's that part of you, a fundamental part of you. I said, if you think of anger, it's a really strong, powerful energy. And it moves upwards and outwards. It's expansive. It's transformative. It's like fire in a way, And in fact, one person used the image of the volcano to describe. And I said, well, perhaps what you need to do is to engage with that volcano, to go into it and follow where it takes you, And you'll start discovering this you. And this you is the you that you've longed to know, craved to know, have missed all your life, ached for in your heart. And you've often, what's the word? I can't think of it, but just put it onto others, people and so on. But it's really about you. And it's about the connection with you. And that could lead you to learn about yourself that you don't know. It's new to you. This person is new to you, and but in that process of exploring that way, you start getting a connection, and you're not likely to feel so lonely.
I've always thought about it as a in the true sense of the form, we are more isolated when we cannot share our authentic selves, and that we box away all these parts of self. But that it actually, from where I stand, increases that distance between in connection with others. I come from Italian culture, which has had a little bit more inclusiveness around the range of emotion. And I've always found North America a little bit, let's clean ourselves up and put on that smile and walk out the door. That's kind of a prerequisite to being able to connect. And do you think that perhaps I don't know if we're referring mostly to Western society, but do you think that we need to we kind of classify emotions positive. These are positive emotions. These are negative emotions. These ones we stay away from. These ones we're supposed to try and emulate. Do you think that creates problems in our society, in our culture, to have that dichotomy between emotions?
Absolutely. Absolutely. The ancient Chinese would say, include everything. It's almost like we're observers or scientists, observing ourselves. And one of the things I loved about my mother was that she was not defensive at all about who she was. So I remember having a conversation with her once, and she was always critical of people, not in a nasty way, not in a malicious way, but look at how that woman's dressed, or look at the way that man walks. I mean, it's absolutely, she would have all these comments about people.
But it was a curious observation, right? She was curious
but
about
I would
it.
Say, but I said, Mom, why are you so critical? And she said, I can't help it. And I love that response. I can't help it. It's like just the way I am. It's me, And another time, she lived in this little village in England, with a 13th century Norman church, and there was a kind of network, a circle of widows, and she was one of them. And another one was a retired ballerina, and I was visiting her, and she said, "Oh, I've cut off that woman. I don't see her anymore." I said, "Why not?" And she said, "Well, whenever I go there, she's watching the television, and I really don't like the programs she watches."
Hmm.
So I said, "Are you telling me that you've cut a relationship because of the TV shows that this woman watches?" She said, "Yes, absolutely, yeah." And she didn't feel any need to explain to me. She didn't feel defensive about it. This is just who I am.
She
Warts
just
and all.
accepted
This
it.
is what I'm like.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not
Mm-hmm.
going to be anything else, as it were.
Mm-hmm.
And I loved that about my mum.
Mm-hmm.
I loved it.
Mm-hmm.
It was such a breath of fresh air.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, of course, it can go to the extreme, and it can be something quite obnoxious.
Absolutely.
But it wasn't. It wasn't like that with her. And I think we need to be more honest. Like you're saying, more authentic.
Yeah.
And that's true. And the ancient Chinese would say, put it all in the pot. It's an alchemical process. So you don't pick and choose. You put it all in, all that you are. The dark side, the hidden, the shame, the secret.
Mm-hmm.
You put it all in because it's part of you.
Yeah, and I wonder whether we're, and I don't know if you're noticing if there's a shift that's starting to happen as we bring in some of the Eastern practices, and they might be getting cleaned out and refined according to Western values a bit more. One of the I've been talking to you earlier. Internal family systems is one of the approaches I've been applying in my practice as well. And one of the reasons I love it so much is because it embraces all these parts of self, and it really is about developing a relationship with parts of self that we keep trying to reject and control and manage, that we perhaps have negative feelings towards. And it's out of cultivating this new relationship with these parts of self that we find more peace internally. Have you noticed a shift slowly happening in Western society as far as integration between East and West? Are we still far from that? What are your thoughts about that?
I'm really not sure, Paola. I'm just this this person in Victoria. I don't know what's happening in the world. I don't know about that.
Yeah.
I think I think the world is faced with such huge challenges. But what I would say is that the kind of approach you were talking about is what I've always meant by the meeting place. You go to the meeting place with yourself.
Yeah.
You go and engage with whatever you are, without judgment or comparison. Without judgment or comparison. And just put it in the mix and just acknowledge it, stay with it, and see what comes out of that. Because what all of that is life. And life is paradox and contradiction. And we can't just take one side that we like and reject the side that we don't like, as it were, So yes, I agree with acknowledging, but people are so full of guilt and feeling over responsible. That's what I feel. People are feeling too responsible for themselves, and and feel they're failing, or they're making mistakes, or they're sabotaging themselves, or whatever. And I say, well, that may be the case, but why can't you just acknowledge, in a almost like a neutral way? Yeah, that's what I'm doing. I'm doing that. And can I just stay with that and see what arises within me? Because who knows, all kinds of, memories or insights can come through that process. And that's what we want. We want change. We want something developing. We don't want to just be stuck in a kind of, an either-or template. We want things to move on, where our lives are more and more authentic. And I think when they become more and more authentic, we will not be lonely. We will not be lonely at all.
I agree. And honestly, this is one of the reasons I wanted to develop a program and a show, because one of in my experience, not only through my training, but certainly through my relationship with my mother, who was very expressive and authentic herself, probably even more so than I can say I have been in my life. I've admired and respected that, and people have really opened their hearts to her. But one of the biggest things I learned beyond my practice has been the power of being inclusive and creating a safe place for that authenticity to emerge, because I think that is probably one of the biggest questions people have about revealing these parts of self, is how safe they feel in doing so, given our culture and expectations and perhaps judgments people might pass.
Yes, and at the same time, if people don't wish to be inclusive, that's okay. You know what I mean? It's I can.
That's okay too.
I tend to be an inclusive kind of person. I'm just saying goodbye to my daughter.
Oh, yes.
Bye. Love you. She's going off to see one of her brothers.
Oh, nice.
And I tend to be inclusive, but I come across people I would like to have some inclusivity with. They don't want to do it,
Yeah.
And I think, well, that's fine. I don't have a judgment, and I don't think people should be anything other than what they are. So my interest only comes when people actually come to see me,
right?
Because they're actually not satisfied and not happy with who they are or how they understand themselves to be. So then that's a different ballgame. It's a different kettle of fish.
So what happens when someone comes to see you, Ahmad, in terms of their process and shifting beyond that place of dissatisfaction and discovering something different? Can you, just as best as your ability can in this brief moment, describe that?
Yeah. Well, the key thing is, for me, that I am absolutely present. And I'm present, in a sense, at the level of where they are. And most people are coming in with some degree of a broken spirit. And so I drop into that spirit reality of my own and be absolutely present in it. And that being present is the greatest form of acknowledgement and support you can give a person, because they start to feel better. They start to feel heard. They start to feel part of. They start to feel relationship. They start to feel connected.
Yeah.
More than when they came in. And then I can add acupuncture to that. So the acupuncture is the use of stainless steel needles, sterile needles, that are going into the body. Where are they going? The ancient Chinese say they're going into the no thing in the something. They're going into that which is eternal, into that which is temporal. they're going into that which is invisible in the visible.
Mm.
They're going to that part of a human being which is greater, larger than their conscious self. And so we go in and meet the person. It's all about the meeting place. You go and meet the person there in that point. And in order to do that, I have to be at the same level as them. If I'm at a mental level with a patient who's deep in a spirit issue, then I won't connect. I could be yakking away. And they don't want yak. They want presence. And they want to feel that I'm connected at that level. I'm not saying they want to. I'm just saying they feel better when I am. And if I'm not, then they feel missed. They're not actually being connected with.
Absolutely. But Brené Brown talked about the power of empathy and presence and being present with one another. In your mind, Ahmad, do you feel that that's something we need to learn more in being with one another in that way?
Yes, I don't see why it can't apply to everybody. And that's why I was saying earlier about one of the best things we can be doing at this time of year is coming from the heart, really coming from the heart, which is inclusive, So, rather than looking at things critically, or things that in a way that separates.
Right.
People, for example, will spend hours reading about negative stuff, reading about how things don't work. Reading about Trump and all of that. And once you understand that Trump is just a destructive force and always will be, it's just the way he is. You don't need more information about that. You don't need to discuss it. It should, if anything, be a prompt to, I didn't like that behavior. Have I seen that behavior in me? Honestly, and what would I do to change that behavior, for example, and
what about something and for that as an example, because I think maybe, in part of my work with trauma, when we become fearful, we can sort of immerse ourselves in an experience and focus on that source of fear. And I can certainly see a lot of fear coming out for people when it comes to even politics, or even if we're talking about COVID, that we might not be talking about it in that emotional language term. We're talking about it externally. Is that something that you would address? That what might be underlying?
Well, yeah, Jean Zhe, back in the 5th century BC, he was a Confucian, but he said, when we're out of alignment, we naturally experience anxiety and fear, if not terror. So the issue, again, is not the symptom, which is fear. It's that we're out of alignment. And so I wouldn't necessarily immediately be talking with a patient about that.
Right.
Because if they're consumed with fear, I have to get to a point where I could address that, but I might really be focused on just being present. And also the kinds of acupuncture points that could help, alleviate that fear in that person. But ultimately, it's my mind is going, Paola, and I'm okay with that as well.
That's okay, right? Well, we lose our mind sometimes.
Quite happy for my mind just to drift away,
It's a creative mind.
Yeah, it's a creative mind. But I'm just trying to remember what I was just saying, and I've forgotten. So you'll have to excuse
Yeah,
me.
no, that's okay. I mean, I find this topic
But
interesting. Yeah.
yeah, no, I was just thinking about the fear. Yeah, about being out of alignment. So the ancient Chinese would always say, it just means you're out of alignment. It's just feedback that you're out of alignment. So alignment with what? With yourself. Well, how can I be more in alignment with myself? Well, how do you relate to the seasons?
Hmm.
You know, do you retire and rest in the winter? You know, what do you do? Do you go with the season? Do you go with the flow of the season? Or do you go against it? And I think I said on an earlier broadcast once, the school year starts in the autumn when nature is actually going inside, down into the roots. In other words, nature is putting on her pajamas, and basically getting ready for bed.
Mm.
But we start it all up in the autumn. Mm. And we ask kids and teachers and parents to be pushing the energy upwards and outwards at a time that requires the absolute opposite. And the function that relates to the autumn, for example, are the lungs. Mm. Well, every autumn, normally in a normal school year, you get, it's probably less this year because of COVID, but you get an epidemic of lung-related illnesses with kids, colds and flus and bronchial and asthmatic stuff, not just in the kids, but in the parents and the teachers as well. Because we're going against nature. We're not going with the season. And
so are there places in this world that are operating there? You're right. We do most of that amping up of activity in the wintertime. Are there?
Well, I know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know Japan starts the school year, I think, in the late winter or early spring. Okay. Used to, anyway. Wow. And then there may be other countries.
Right.
But we, and we just do everything. We have the main meal at the end of the day, when our digestive organs are weakest. They're most active in the earlier part of the day.
Well, I can tell you that I have not followed that rhythm because I've intuitively always known that I'm better off eating in the day, and before I go to sleep is not the time for me to be eating a big meal. But that would be, it just didn't fit for me in this sense of our body rhythms and our activity, right? So we're bringing into alignment how we operate in life in the day with our human life form and what it requires and needs. Yeah.
At the same time, you have cultures like Mexico, like France, maybe like Italy, where people will eat late, but they eat together.
Yeah.
The whole thing is about coming together, and the emphasis is on that. I mean, yes, good food, but the emphasis is on that. I've been in situations like that, in Mexico, in Provence, in France. I don't think I mentioned to you that I do seminars here in Victoria, but I also do them in England.
Wow.
As well, normally.
Are you doing remote right now with COVID and some of the changes? Are you doing any remote work or no?
I haven't actually done that. It's been talked about. There's been some places that have been interested, but I haven't pushed it because part of me has felt, no, I'm just going to back right off. I'm just going to take it easy, dial down the noise. Do less doing, do more being,
Nice.
Because I know it's healthy for me and it's good for my heart.
Yeah, yeah.
One of the ancient Chinese predicted this time that there would be this real problem with the lungs, diseases affecting the lungs, which would then be followed by diseases affecting the heart. And they anticipated this, from their observation of cycles, 60-year cycles, and through the lens of the 5-element cycle within those 60-year cycles. So, and then, if you have a kind of pathological process going on in the culture, that is where people are not living with nature, where they're focused on an identity through doing, and agendas, and so they're not even living in the present. They're always living in the future, or if it's fear, they're living in the past, and it's chaotic. It's absolutely chaotic, and I think COVID is actually a reflection of the state of incoherence biologically, culturally that's occurred, and will definitely not be the last thing that's coming, and is not the issue. COVID is not the issue. The issue is we're not living coherently. We're not living with nature. We're not in relationship with nature. We're not looking at relationship as the key, what I call the meeting place.
Mm-hmm.
We're not, and I use the example of the seasons, we're not meeting with the seasons.
I don't even know that we're meeting organically with the season of our own bodies, because it's very much, and while I see achievement in part about, triumphing over our own what we perceive as limitations, it's so much about conquering, overcoming and, even ignoring what our body needs, and, in the interest of our success, we almost alienate ourselves and our own bodies. And I see that as being one of the things that leads to a lot of illness as well, is
absolutely.
that huge
I agree.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And with COVID, I just knew that it was going to, in a sense, it was going to make the situation a lot worse for people, because just we're not used to really being with themselves, and taking their cue from everything outside of themselves, identity through what is outside of yourself, through your work, through your marriage, through whatever, but nothing internal. And so I agree with that. And
well, we're getting a crash course in that right now. We're getting a crash course in having to go inward, and I've seen.
Well, that's why. That's why. Sorry, I was going to say that's why I wrote the article about the true significance of COVID-19, because it was just something I could write, and send out to lots of people I knew, to give a different perspective on it all, kind of stuff I've been sharing now.
Yeah, that was a lovely article, and really looking at our relationship. I think certainly First Nations has always talked about a relationship with nature, and we are definitely being. Nature has its own language, right? So we're definitely having to witness the consequences of not having that relationship with nature.
And at the same time, I don't think it's something hard to do. And, just going for a 15-minute walk even. I mean, if the weather allows, but just a 15-minute walk, or even just to sit on a bench and listen. When we listen more, that also supports the heart. And instead, we're so busy talking. We're so busy talking.
We're so busy talking, and
it's so noisy.
Yeah, I think that we're sort of introduced to that from the moment we're born, and in the name of productivity and success and control, as you mentioned. I don't know, Dylan, if you have any thoughts or questions as you're listening to this.
I think the only real big thought that comes into my mind is the constant parallels with nature. I think that's something that's a very big contrast to the way things with spirituality tend to be in the West, where it seems like spirituality in the West is often as if you're looking into the unknown, whereas to me, I really relate with a lot of the things you're talking about, Ahmad, because I look at nature as a very supernatural thing. I think it's a very mystical thing in itself. So I've really been enjoying these perspectives.
Well,
Yeah, I mean the poem that won a prize. I won this prize this year. Second prize. There were two prizes.
The poetry.
Yeah,
poetry?
yeah.
Yes.
It was a kind of island-wide and Gulf Island-wide competition. But the poem that won the prize was called Tree.
Do you want to read it to us?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I was
that'd
just
be
thinking.
lovely.
Just give me a sec, okay? Because it won't be a sec.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. Hang on. I'm terrible at this.
That's okay. A worthy endeavor.
I'm terrible at dealing with technology. I locked myself out of my personal banking account today.
Oh,
because I'm just hopeless.
Oh, I honestly
am absolutely hopeless
yes.
with the technology.
And we have been thrust into technology recently, with whether we like it or not. Yeah. So
what I'm doing is that I've just it might be easier.
Oh, that's okay.
I don't want to hold this up.
No, I mean,
here we go.
Yes.
Here we go. So it's called Tree. So it's in three parts. It's not long. It's in three parts.
Mm-hmm.
So first, here we go. Oh, you binders of the earth, you who anchor life in the land and in me, whose generosity creates a shelter even for strangers and a safe harbor for many. How do you see us? I know of people, even children, who tell me you speak of the origins of the world to those who can listen, who have been guided by you in seeming silence and seeming stillness through the snow to safe harbor. Can we recognize you as our elders? Even the pencil hums when you play with the wind and sing your songs of ancient beginnings and of futures yet to come. Here's the second part. My Cree wife who was would go out in the night into the forest amongst the dormant plants, the bears and the cougars, and sit peacefully with her night tribe, the great arboreal people, who shared what can only be shared in the dead of night, the deep darkness which alone knows your name. Third part. She was clad in the wisdom of the trees. She was clad and masked in cedar bark and spruce root. Her cedar mask closed her outer eye, and her inner eye opened. Her cedar mask closed her outer eye, and her inner eye opened. So all these things that are mentioned in the poem actually happened, and actually happened, to me and to people I know.
Wow.
And all encompassed in the sense of tree.
Wow.
So that's the poem.
That is lovely. That is lovely. And also right now your published book, where can people find your book right now?
Well, you can get it on Amazon and Lulu Publications, I think is another one. Or yeah, I mean I have copies here, but I can mail them to people.
Wonderful.
But the book is called Tao of Wellbeing. It's not the Tao.
Oh, it's not the Tao. It's Tao of Wellbeing. Okay, thank you.
Tao of Wellbeing.
Thank you.
And the subtitle is The Transformation of Suffering into Health.
That sounds wonderful.
And it came about because I was when I was running a seminar in England, at the end of the seminar, and this was on ancient Chinese perspectives on health, one of the participants said, "Where's the book?"
Ah.
And I realized that this perspective that I was sharing actually isn't anywhere else. I haven't seen it anywhere else, and yet is implicit in all the ancient Chinese work. And but if I can just give you one more, can I give you one more little poem?
Love mine. To. Absolutely.
Not mine.
Okay.
But a guy who I think is the greatest living poet of our time right now. And his name is David White. And he's an Englishman with strong Irish roots. And he lives on Whidbey Island, just off the coast by Seattle. And he was coming every year to Victoria, to read and share. And I feel whenever I'm looking at anything that he's written or listening to him, I always feel like I'm looking at myself. I feel he's like me, and or I'm like him.
Wonderful. Yeah, I'm curious now.
So this is a poem he wrote, and he is world famous now.
Wow.
He has addressed the EU. He's worked with organizations, has done, like the Royal Air Force or Boeing, where he helps them look at what they're doing, look at the language they're using to describe what they're doing, and to see how is that language really generative? Are they actually meeting? Are they actually going more authentically into life with that language or not?
Wow.
Anyway, but so he was asked when Boeing launched a plane, it was the 777 passenger jet. He was asked to, and the Boeing company received a trophy for this plane. He was asked to write a poem about this. Amazing,
Nice, yeah.
And so he wrote this poem called "Working Together." And this is it. Again, it's short. We shape our life to fit this world, and by the world are shaped again. Oh, by the way, I'd say this is a classic poem for me of the meeting place.
Okay, lovely.
We shape our life to fit this world, and by the world are shaped again. The visible and the invisible, working together in common cause to produce the miraculous. The visible and the invisible working together in common cause to produce the miraculous. I am thinking of the way the intangible air passed at speed round a shaped wing. So he's thinking of aerodynamics, I'm thinking of the way the intangible air passed at speed round a shaped wing easily holds our weight. So may we in this life trust to those elements we have yet to see or imagine, and look for the true shape of our own self by forming it well to the great intangibles about us. Wow. So may we in this life trust to those elements we have yet to see or imagine, and look for the true shape of our own self by forming it well to the great intangibles about us.
Wow.
So
beautiful.
Beautiful that meeting place between the visible and the invisible,
absolutely,
the known and the unknown.
Just love it.
And recognizing how that plays itself out in aerodynamic engineering.
Yes. Yeah. And worded so eloquently with aerodynamic engineering. So that's amazing. That was a beautiful poem. Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate it. And thank you for sharing your poem, Ahmad. I know that you have lots of wisdom, and I'm sure that you help a lot of people that come across your path. And I'm so grateful that you volunteered and were open to sharing your experience and your perspective. I think it can add a lot, especially with what we're going through today as we reach out in this way, connecting through internet, through podcasting. So I appreciate that. And I don't know, Dylan, if there's anything else you want to add to that, or.
I think those were some lovely poems to share. Thank you for coming by and sharing that, and just all of the information you've had on acupuncture. And I know you just barely touched on some of the ideas of Eastern medicine, but it was very insightful. Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, and
thoroughly enjoyed it.
We could have a follow-up, right? I think there's, sometimes I'm like, we're just scratching the surface of things, but I always find it fascinating, and I love the sharing of minds. I think that's how we also come together with ideas. I always liked Einstein saying, you cannot solve a problem with the same mind that created it, and that's the beauty of reaching out to other people. And so I always thank you, Ahmad, and you've always struck me as a very gentle soul in this world, and I really sense that you do give that kindness that we so much are craving and needing right now in our lives.
Yeah, it's all about love, really, isn't it?
It really is, yeah.
How to do that.
Yeah.
How to do that.
Yeah, how can we do that? So thank you so much, Ahmad, and we'll be in touch. I certainly would love to hear from you again, and perhaps we'll have another opportunity to chat.
Okay, you too.
Okay, so we will talk.
Arrivederci, Roma.
Arrivederci. Take good care. All the best to you, Ahmad. We'll talk soon.
All right.
Okay, bye-bye. Bye. Bye. And thank you, Dylan. You're always a pleasure, and so patient and calm, and I feel your presence here. So we will be
calming environment. It's easy to be.
Absolutely. And I want to thank listeners for tuning in to our show. We are going to be wrapping up right now. Until next time, I hope that you can practice kindness and find that lovely meeting place to which Ahmad Miles is talking about, where we can meet with one another and share in space of authenticity. All the best to you. Take good care.